Hey guys, this is your host of Lit Literature, JP, aka The Demon, and we are back in action talking actual episode 9, No More Sidebars. This is going to be the first episode on Words of Radiance. These were still recorded a while ago and are still practiced, though we are getting better and better every episode. These episodes are better than the episodes we recorded on The Way of Kings, so that's good news. But we're excited about them. No live video yet. Those will come in actual episode 14, I believe, when we get to Oathbringer. So pretty pumped, and hopefully you enjoy it. I think we got rid of all our audio issues, though we'll do our best to mitigate any of those in the future. So anyway, without further ado, first episode on Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, Book 2 of the Stormlight Archive. Cheers! I'm live. Andrew, are you live?
I am live, sir.
All right, folks, we are both live. Again, thanks for joining us for Lit Literature. Joining us, I should speak it. For Lit Literature, we're here today to start the first episode of Book 2.
Book 2.
This is the Words of Radiance, no longer The Way of Kings. So we finished Book 1. We've gone through a lot of evolution in our format. We're going to try a few things different this time. But we're super pumped to talk about Book 2. Before we jump right into it, though, we've got a few things to cover. First, the end of Book 1. We find out the villains, well, supposed villains, could be the Parshmen or Parshendi. Both, right?
Right.
So we find out that Yasna has some hint or hypothesis that they're the Voidbringers.
So we enslaved the Voidbringers. We didn't make them go away.
We make them go away. We turned them into people.
Josh thinks he's a Lethe. He says.
Ooh. We've also got Zeth, Sun Villano, assigned to make a hit on Dalinar. Yeah. Dalinar Kholin. Not the king. We'll say that again. Dalinar. Not the king, but Dalinar. And from a guy who seems to be trying to accomplish something like unifying the world before what he thinks is coming.
That seems to be a common theme with a lot of bad guys, though, is you got to destroy the current world before you build up a new one.
Or is he just trying to...
Almost no utopia is built without genocide.
Other than that, we've got the last thing that happened in the first book, which was, I think, what we think is one of the last heralds might have appeared, going semi-crazy. He's dark-eyed. He has a sword that doesn't disappear when he passes out, and Wit was waiting for him. And we meet him again later on in this book, briefly, at least. And so I don't know about you guys, but I personally think that guy's a herald.
I think he is.
And I think that some of his conversation...
Yeah, I think he is.
Some of his mental conversations to himself in that cell that we meet him in later on was probably indicating that.
Well, especially to the fact that when he comes out, like, I forget exactly what he says, but he's like, it's been, like... I've finally returned, and it's coming.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes back to they get enslaved or they're tortured for a long time and then they're reborn or they somehow come back.
Since we probably won't spend much time on him before, I do want to say his little, interlude segment or mini chapter that was later on, he says, we need to get them. We don't have time to teach you how to forge. It takes too long, but we could soul cast this stuff. He's thinking that they're in a Stone Age still. So clearly in the last, that 4,000 years ago when they all went away, the heralds would probably come back and bring these people basically out of Stone Age again in a cycle. Mm-hmm. And this time, because they didn't go back the same way, that cycle might have been broken. So that's really interesting to think about.
Also, that the guy's been in hell, or whatever it's been for so long that it broke him.
It just broke him, yeah. It's been longer than normal.
Yeah.
We get a sense that it was much longer than normal.
Right.
Yeah.
So something...
wasn't it because... Doesn't he mention something about, one is not enough to hold them off anymore? Or something like that?
Because he was the only one holding them off.
Because he was the only one, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was that something that...
I don't know.
I thought I remember them saying something about one of the 10 or something. I don't know.
Could be. I mean, it's really interesting.
So you wonder, though, if maybe the other 9, even though they kind of scattered, they maybe did something or there were certain things that they were doing in the world that kind of prolonged this, or kept it like at bay longer, so that one guy was just stuck there.
I feel like Wit is also a potential herald.
Wit's something.
Ooh.
I don't know what he is.
Like especially when they're making the comment like you need to find a woman of your own age, and he's like, there's nobody here.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
Well, he
Yeah.
said there's only one.
There's one, but we never got along.
So I don't
There
know.
could
it's
be
gonna
only
be
one.
interesting, yeah.
One of the heralds could be
One
a
of the
woman.
heralds could be a woman.
Yeah, and we don't get along because
Well,
they all-
actually, I think that we know that there's multiple heralds that are women.
Yeah,
We
there
know
definitely
this-
is.
So,
We know for sure it's stuff.
but he said there was only one. So my hypothesis
then
is that Wit
nearby.
is something even older. But that's only because we know he comes from other Sanderson books.
Right.
So what is he really? He could be a herald. I'm not saying he's not, but if he is, he was something else before he was a herald. So that's what I think. But I don't know that because I, unfortunately, though I've read some of Sanderson's books, I actually haven't run into a Wit. Or, in this case, whatever his name would be in that book.
Oh yeah, I forgot what his real name is, but he gave his
Hoyd. That's it.
Hoyd.
Hoyd.
Yeah.
Hoyd.
Yeah.
Or at least
Yeah.
that's
A
what he's
name.
pretending is his
So,
real name at the
so
moment.
that's something I gotta check into.
Yeah, an alias.
Because we're kind of getting introduced to Brandon Sanderson's universe through
Multiverse,
this,
or,
through this book series. So it's going to be interesting. So we're not in the inn for some of the goodies,
Right.
But so we kind of get to that spot. I think that also we meet some other. So we'll jump into book 2 now. We start with Yesna, and we go back to the night of the assassination. We get some new facts, and we get a lot of information that's been kind of hidden from us. So the one thing I want to bring up is, first off, let's just kick it off about she sees shadows, which clearly indicates, I think that's her Spren. I think her Spren's that Shadow Sword guy. But interesting is, you know how all the groups of the Radiants have a different way to make an initial bond? Mm-hmm. And for Yesna's, it was a challenge. It was a challenge.
It was.
And then at the end, after the challenge, right, he kind of
like
bowed to
acknowledges
her.
her.
Yeah.
But you don't even know if that was necessarily her Spren, because it seemed to be something similar with Shallan, that there were multiple of those pattern heads that she was seeing, and when they maybe only one of them came over, that's when they decided like this is the one, or we even maybe get a feeling that Pattern's been with her longer than that scene, so those were other
We do get
other
hints of
Sprens.
Pattern in her childhood.
And-
right?
Yeah, we get that same hint with Syl even.
Yeah. So, well, we think.
It seems
we do,
like she
but-
seems to
but
have
it's obvious
memories
for Shallan,
before
it's
he
less
notices.
obvious for Kaladin.
I just want to put a quick pin or a note on this important fact that the and we could talk more about the timeline later if you guys want to, because I think there's some really important stuff going on with the timeline, especially the past. A lot of significant events are kind of happening at the same time. I just want to put a pin in it to remember the fact that if this is in fact Yesna's Spren that she eventually forged a bond with at this point, it seemed to happen at a very opportune time when a lot of massive global changes are going into effect. So I just want to put a note on that and leave it there, and we can talk more about timeline later.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say she's been seeing shadows for a while, though. And it sounds really interesting because there's something I want to comment. Our good old buddy, her brother, King Elokar, is constantly going on about seeing shit. I see things, like they're there, I see them.
Right.
I mean, he might be a little bit of a Radiant in training, potentially, yeah? By the way, I don't
He's
know
such
this.
a tool.
I don't know this, even in where we are.
Have some major character development.
It's coming, Manny. It's coming.
But it could also be that to maybe even drive home that fact that the Radiants are humans. They're just people that happen to have gotten this these Spren.
But
or
every
this
Radiant
connection.
so far has been pretty badass.
But listen though, every Radiant, the Spren are attracted to different things in each person.
And I
right?
feel like someone who demonstrates a very strong honor, determination,
Honor
or
Spren.
some other value that they're attracted to it.
They're attracted
They're
to it,
drawn
yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Or like Shallan,
Yeah.
the Lie Spren. So her story's so convoluted and crazy that this Lyspread just loves it. It just feeds off it.
Pattern's my favorite.
And I love the audiobook. The audiobook voices are so good. Elokar's little whiny voice as well. So well done. But so getting back to Yezna. So we see kind of, she goes into Shadesmar. Shadesmar, thank you. Jesus. And I do the audiobook too. She goes into Shadesmar and
Shardmar. Yeah.
And she's, in my opinion, she kind of handled her first time there a little bit better than Shallan did. She was pretty intuitive at getting out of that situation.
Well, I think she was better prepared because she's actually a Welf.
Yeah. Well, that's true. And she's got a lot of info. And I'm wondering what, a group of Knights Radiant she has. Because she shares soul casting with Shallan, but we don't know what her other ability is, which we learned Shallan's ability is light weaving in a way. Yeah. So, super cool. The other thing I want to point out before we move on is Gavilar and Amaran's conversation. They were in the hallway having a conversation about some interesting plan, which we now know the Parshendi freaked out and got Gavilar, basically assassinated Gavilar. So that's...
Which kind of definitely worries me a little bit, because as we start to get a little bit of one Parshendi's point of view in some of the interludes, I'm starting to really... And even Kaladin's assessment of them on the battlefield, it seems like they might be actually on the right side of things.
I don't know about the right side.
I don't know. Or it worries me that they're so hell-bent on stopping this plan that seems to be what they think really bad.
Yeah,
so I think...
Yeah, I think they are, because
they
were enslaved before by the gods. They had no choice but to bring destruction.
Oh.
And they don't want to do that again. They've been free to have choices. And then when the king told them to bring the gods back, they're like, we don't want any of
Or whatever
this.
the king's plan was. It could have even been something just like, I think you guys could be in war. Let's try this. And they're like, no, that's the path we take.
So listen to this, too. If you think about it in terms of gods, right? So the Alethi worship the heralds. So when Gavilar says, I want to bring the gods back, he might be thinking, heralds? I want to find a way to bring the heralds back, which interestingly might have something to do with the Parshendi, their gods being what? Maybe Voidbringers, or maybe this god that makes them Voidbringers or whatever. So heralds, one group's gods coming back.
So I think it could be just
they might be
in
linked.
translation,
or they might be linked.
Oh,
right?
they might
one
be
coming back without the other.
Well, and we also do have a bit of a glimpse in that the Parshendi have Spren, but they're different. They have a different Spren than the than humans.
Well, not necessarily. So some of their forms that we learn later, although we're going to talk about it later, are based on normal Spren. Like their forms are on normal Spren, but there is a Spren, the red one, which might be a little different. And we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
I feel like
Go ahead.
the King Gavilar's intention was not to bring back the heralds, but more so the Knights Radiant. And then I feel like the Knights Radiant is what they're considering partly to their gods, because I think they mention how Kaladin is a Bidebringer, that it has the power of their gods.
I think that would definitely make sense, because if Gavilar had those visions and ended up being cut down before his time, who would those visions naturally go to next? If not his brother. Yeah. So I think that is definitely a potential.
Well, also something maybe to think about is
So much good.
it could be that he just had the visions, but we don't even necessarily know that. It could be maybe he wanted to bring the Radiance back because he found he had a Spren, or he could be something like Kaladin or one of them, because we even get that he was a super honorable man. He was a great king, so you would think maybe he was attracted by, or one of the Spren was attracted to him, so he could be have these powers before he was killed.
Right.
But maybe it's just a set that we don't know, or he didn't know how to use it, and that's why he wanted to bring the Radiance back.
So interesting. Last thing on Yezna. She also walks in the hallway and runs into two guys who seem to be in the middle of nowhere, or like in the wrong place, talking about something kind of hilarious. They're talking about something that we read. They're talking about this person that they call Ash, who's screwing with her photos or her pictures, artwork.
Oh.
Yeah.
And we actually
Yeah, the lady that has
We
those two
read
guys. Like,
those
The
two guys.
mistress.
pottery.
She's known as the
Yeah, she's
mistress.
the mistress. She's ruining this artwork of a specific herald.
And could it be because she doesn't want someone to recognize when someone
Interesting.
returns or something like that?
There's another thing is those two guys were very, very well informed. And hilariously were like, oh, you know, I forget what their reaction was. I'd have to go back and read it. But their reaction to Yesna when she walks up on him was kind of like, she's like, they're obviously foreign nobles or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Do we know who this lady is?
No.
We don't.
We
yet.
don't.
My hypothesis from that conversation is that all three of those fucking people are heralds.
So I'm kind of just getting like a flashback of something that happened at the beginning of the first book. Is there any potential link between this and the fact that just one of the somebody noted like, oh, one of the heralds is missing when they went
Yeah.
to some certain kingdom? Like,
Well, no, the missing herald was the guy
That got left
the guy
behind.
who got left behind.
yeah, I know the
Yeah.
there was a in the first but I mean, remember there was I think Zeth was like walking through a courtyard
noticed,
and he
yeah.
noticed like a missing herald,
Yeah,
right? Was
he
it the
noticed.
same herald that she's destroying?
No, she's destroying a woman,
Oh, she's destroying a woman. Okay.
covering her face, and
She's probably destroying her own.
her own
Probably
face.
her own.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they notice that though?
Not if she's covered up.
That's true. She could be.
Anyway, it's all
Speculation.
It's all just a theory.
Yeah.
So I just wonder, like these heralds that have been around. I think that they are immortal, and they've just been
Yeah.
living it up, doing their
Axes
thing.
could be one of them.
Yeah.
The
But
crazy
something-
Spren researcher.
Yeah. He's definitely one. I agree. He's definitely one. Also, why would those two guys that are kind of like talking to each other be heralds themselves? Because I thought they were supposed to stay away from each other, like separated.
Yeah.
They were.
Why would they be coming back together?
Because I mean, honestly, when you're around for 4,000 years and there's only a few people who understand your plight, you might, you know,
You might
give a
gravitate
shit.
towards some of them.
And that was the
Possibly.
plan to stay away, but after a couple thousand years, like, one of my friends are.
I mean,
Or it could mean that they know something is going to happen.
they may. They are certainly in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. The other thing is, so okay. Well, I think we should probably leave Yesna at that. We're going to have a lot to talk about. We talked about the mystery men, cognitive realm. Cognitive realm might be pretty interesting to talk about. So we get, the next chapter we read is Shallan. They're on a boat, and yes,
I'm on a boat.
I'm on a boat, and they start. She's kind of training Shallan a little bit, and Shallan learns about the three realms, right? Physical, spiritual, and cognitive.
Right.
And she kind of indicates that most Spren are taking a physical form from the cognitive realm. And that's based on our minds, cumulative minds, which I thought's an awesome concept because that actually exists in some physics. Mm-hmm. This like cognitive kind of reality. So if you guys want to make any points on that, if not, we'll move on. Nope. Okay. So then we get into Shallan on the boat. And I think that we could all continue our conversation with Yesna and just follow Shallan's experience on the boat to what we think
Well,
is.
one thing that's really interesting is Shallan's kind of given over to, or told by Yesna to investigate her, kind of learn about her Spren. One thing I think is so interesting is her Spren doesn't seem to have the ability to hide
Right.
himself from other
It doesn't. Yeah. Not
other people.
permanently.
Whereas,
Not
because he can go and he can kind of make himself less visible or sit on someone's back
Super
or
small.
kind of sit there, but just make it harder to see him.
Syl.
Whereas Sly can just literally
Who's Sly?
Syl can just
Sly is
make
Sylvester Stallone.
Syl can make herself invisible to certain people.
Just like sitting on his.
So, so if we talk about that, that's a good point. Also, he comes and I think like Syl, he's kind of really stupid at first. Like he doesn't have
Very
information. He's kind of
infantile.
learning as he develops with
and it seems some reason coming over to the physical realm, somehow making that passage makes them forget everything and kind of revert to a very base form,
Right.
and then they have to slowly work back up.
But I feel like he is much more adept than Still is. He picks up some things a lot faster.
Yeah, he was picking up on those abstract concepts really, really quickly. Like on, I think, day 1 or day 2, he was already asking Shallan, like, what is meaning of life? Why are you?
Yeah, he picked up the concept before the language, whereas Syl was picking up the language before
But
the
we don't know
concepts.
how long he stayed around Shallan before he made himself like visible or kind of known.
But I don't
because he could
think
have been
they
there for
gain-
years.
I don't think they gain anything until they start to work with their counterparts.
Yeah.
So they
I was
stay-
thinking that it might possibly have something to do with the type of Spren he is. The fact
Agreed.
that he seems to be attracted to lies would indicate that he has to be able to like decipher.
Well,
what
even
is
Yesna
truth.
says that she drew it for Yesna, and
Right.
Yesna's like, that's one of the most known, powerful cognitive Spren. It's basically super smart.
Yeah.
It's like a code breaker. It's
Yeah.
got a very, very
Right.
He made that
intense,
very apparent.
logical mind.
Right.
But then also
So-
the thing about he likes lies, like I feel like that term is used so loosely. I don't believe it really means what we think
yeah,
it
because
is.
he
It does,
calls
yeah, it
truth
might
lie
not.
all
I-
the time. Yeah.
It might not.
He likes
Like
truth.
sarcasm. He
Well,
thinks,
so they
Doesn't he say at some point like truth is the best type of lies?
Yes,
Yeah.
he does. Yeah.
when you use the truth to maybe mislead, or
Right,
it's
right.
probably not even just. I think something that's interesting is it seems the whole what the perception of it is. It's not necessarily the fact or what you say;
Yeah.
it's how it's perceived. And he seems to get very excited when you're telling a truth in a way that makes it
Perceived
differently, and it's like
Right.
those are the best. Like,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense with Shallan because she has the ability to change people's perception of her.
Yeah,
Right.
she does.
and that's her whole growth as a person.
Yeah.
And
is that.
something to point out too is that they're called lie Spren, but they call themselves truth Spren.
Truth Spren.
So it's kind of interesting, right? It's perception,
Right.
But they like that kind of stuff, and I think it's because they like they're probably attracted to something.
The complexity
about
of the truth versus the
complexity.
lies.
Exactly.
It's the pattern, I think. It's the code that you have to crack within the
Exactly.
way that the truth and lies are playing with each other.
So super cool.
It's kind of things that question things that we have come to know as definitives or like
Yeah.
wholes. Like when she asks, like, what is a chair? Or like, I don't know, like,
what is a table? And a table has 4 legs, and he's like, would you not say without like a third or another like reference point that this chair or this table still has 4 legs? He's like, define a leg. To
Yeah.
me, it's just wood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's all wood.
Right.
It's really cool. So he's really interested into that kind of.
he's very
cognitive-
abstract.
Yeah.
I should be pattern then. 'cause I like that
It's
stuff
pretty
too.
awesome. Yeah, no. So I think we got a cool new Spren character we get
Plus
to
it
like,
sounded a little perverted,
know,
and they got a
learn
weird
through.
voice.
So the other thing about this is, in this situation, you realize that the boat that they're riding on.
I'm
has
on a
taken-
boat.
I'm on a boat, and that's gonna be so.
It's gonna sink.
We'll smooth that out.
Yeah. No, but so the captain picked up some new crew members.
One specific.
yeah.
One specifically, who, in my opinion, they don't say this factually, but he probably screwed
Right.
them over. Is
Yeah.
basically what happened, right? So basically, Yesna's
Who screwed them over? The captain?
The new crew.
the new guy he let him in the middle of night, I think, and this is what happened. Yesna was already getting stressed, almost like she kind of had some spider sense going on, because Shallan was talking to her, but basically they come on the boat and they freaking kill her,
Yeah.
supposedly. And I think we have to have
Yeah,
some
maybe a
Yeah.
Brett bet potentially
Just
on whether or not
because
we think she's
maybe.
truly gone.
No,
Something tells me that we might all bet the same way on this one. But I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, let's discuss it.
here's-
and
Let's
then make a
discuss
bet.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
so
down to all of us
some
bet. 'Cause
points-
we'll all have to pay up.
some points I wanna point out. First one is that everyone brings up the body point,
Yeah.
but is Shallan not tripping over her body enough evidence to say that she's not dead? That's pretty much the only point that they give. Shallan ran over towards the direction that she thought Yasna's body was.
Right.
And she
Right.
didn't trip over it.
Well, it could also just mean that they had some
They
use
carried
for
it
her
up on
body,
deck.
and then
Yeah.
after the murder,
Or
brought her
maybe she was
somewhere,
just in the
or-
wrong effing place in the middle of the night on a big boat.
But also, wasn't a chest or something missing from her room?
No,
the
Shalon
chest was there.
found
She
the
found
chest,
the
right?
chest, yeah.
I
It
thought
had
that was
all of her
after the
notes
fact,
and stuff
though.
like that. Oh, she did find it later, right?
She found
was
it
like
on
on
the shore.
I'm
It
sure,
washed
but she
up.
said it was missing from her room.
I don't think so.
I
did she?
don't remember that. Yeah.
I thought it was something interesting like
Are
that.
you looking
Let
that
me
up?
just look that up.
Yeah. But
We'll check on that.
when she came back from the cognitive realm after setting the ship on fire, but sinking it, the body was gone. It wasn't disappeared. I thought it's just.
Well, the
not
body
there.
was gone
Some
before
gone.
because when Shalon sank the ship, she was already off the ship.
No, she wasn't.
She wasn't yet? I thought she
Oh,
was
yeah.
already
Get
in
off
the
the
water.
When she-
No, because what she did is she turned the entire ship into water.
Well,
So when
the
she's
bottom of
on of it, like the whole ship, I think the whole ship just turned to
Turned to
water,
water.
except for everything inside of it.
The
so
walls
she just all of a sudden
melted.
was in the water.
Yeah.
It seemed like the
Oh, is that
bottom
what
of the ship.
Oh, that was it. That was it. Yeah, that's what she did. Good call,
Because
Josh.
she had the entire boat was one sphere, and she's like trying to convince it to be water, and she's like, if you do this, you'll save the people, and it just the entire ship just all turns to water.
Yeah.
Well, we don't learn about this till later, but we also learned something about Shalon's abilities that I was wondering if it's possible that Yasna could have a similar ability.
So we don't. That's
We don't
the
know what her
problem,
second
right?
is.
We don't
Yeah.
know what Yasna's second ability is.
Yeah.
And
That's the
if
thing.
she can create some type of light illusion,
I
also,
significantly doubt that she has anything to do with light with her second ability.
Okay.
Because
Light
each
weaving?
radiant only has one overlapping ability.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she
Which
said,
her ability could be anything.
yeah. She said, "Oh, I was really hoping to have the same type of spin, but
they
we
don't.
but we don't.
And the
yeah.
spren would like go towards that she has different skills, so they
Yeah.
both can do the soul
Soul
casting. What we don't know what all the 10 are as of right now, what the
Yeah,
10 powers are. So we're wondering, could she have something that somehow helped her or aided her in that
Yeah.
situation? And you also wonder, she seems so nervous. Maybe this was something that she hadn't done, or she knew this was coming, and she was like, I'm wondering if she knew something was coming, and she's like, I have to do something extremely risky that could kill me. I have to try this, because if I don't, I'm gonna everything's gonna fall apart.
So
Right.
I think that this has to be a brick bet for sure. Now, my memory is extremely, extremely hazy in the end of the second book, but I am 90% positive that I can't participate in this bet.
Huh.
I have to leave that to Josh, though. Do you remember?
I do.
Okay, so we can't, because there is a piece of information that I think comes out at the very end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not in this. Now, okay, my memory is pretty hazy on this, so.
But if you were in it, which way would you bet?
This is what I'm saying, because I remember this particular scene. We'll talk about in our next podcast, but I think it gives us a piece of information that maybe gives me too much of an
All
advantage.
right. Well, I'll start with it then. So the bet is going to be:
Yeah.
is Yasna dead?
Yeah.
Is that what we're doing?
I think you have to do that.
I'm.
See, look, the small cabin was in shambles, clothing on the floor, paper strewn everywhere. The trunk with Jasmine's
Ooh,
books
good
was gone.
detail, Manny.
Ooh, good catch.
Damn.
Let's talk about that
fishy.
as soon as
Also,
we're done with this bet really
think-
quick, since we started it. So I'm going to say that she's not dead. That's my.
There's no way she's dead.
Yeah.
She's such a badass character. She
Right,
could've died
yeah,
from some
I would agree. I have the
assassins.
exact same viewpoint.
Yeah, but Sanderson.
If, like, I'm not gonna lie. If that is the way that she died, I'm
evidence
gonna be very
alone is that
disappointed.
her
in Sanderson.
character is too
Well, the
badass.
thing is, though, is that
That's Exhibit A.
It would be so anticlimactic.
I agree. Well, I'll explain why after we get
Oh.
Ben's.
I think she's alive.
Okay.
All right.
So we all
This
pretty
is a
much
group
think she's
bet,
alive.
and that means that if anything, so Josh and I will by default be in on the bet, and we have to drink with you.
So since we're
Oh,
all in
wow.
agreement, you're going to be in with our
Exactly,
bet.
because now it's become a group, and we don't have a say.
We should have like
So
a rule that
because Jeff said that, I'm really confused because that either means that he just wants to be a team player or he really wants to drink. And with Jeff, I have no idea which one it could be.
I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know. So, Josh, you agree? Mm-hmm. All right. We're on to
I was
20.
going to say it'd be cool if we could also, well, maybe not on this one, but in future, if we have everyone vote on the same rule.
A sidebar.
We put in almost a backup that if it's true, everyone has to drink, and that'll encourage one person to always be like, I'm going to bet against.
I'm gonna bet against it.
Okay. Well, that's a good idea.
Because that'll always encourage one person to be like, if I'm going to drink.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
So
That's a
the
good
reason
idea, though. I like
reason
that.
I'm guessing that she's still alive is because I think Sanderson kind of put in some threads of like doubt, and I think that if he was trying to misdirect us into thinking that she was still alive, then the mother wouldn't have protested saying, no, she's still alive. Like, I think that if that was supposed to be a bit, like, I think he's trying to soften the big reveal, and then the fact that the mom's like, no, she's still alive, now we're thinking, oh, so that's not going to be like a super big surprise, because now he's already saying to us
It is a
she's
good
still
point
alive.
that Navani, absolutely, even after Shallan talks to her, which we'll get to in a really awesome scene later, but
Still.
she's like, no,
Yeah,
I'm not accepting that.
right.
And then she's like, give me all the details. I need to know exactly where the knife blade went.
Nothing is too short,
Exactly.
or nothing is too pivotal or small or
So
Right.
I
No
think
details.
something
Trivial.
about Navani, she may know
She
more.
knows her daughter, I
think she may know
and I think she
more.
knows that her daughter's capable of doing really tricky
Yeah, she knows her
things.
children really well.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, my son's a douche. My daughter's a badass bitch. So.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on from that. I think let's compile this shit and.
But first, since I didn't get to speak, Jeffrey,
Jeffrey.
all right, I guess.
Let's
I'm
talk
just gonna
about
have to
the
edit this
fact-
whole section down.
let's talk about the fact that Yasna
Yeah.
sets up a whole bunch of stuff before this death. Like, let me send this money to your brothers. Let me tell you that you need to make yourself perceived as someone with power. Let me get you so you're
Yeah.
betrothed to my
Dude.
nephew. Like, it's like
Yeah.
a whole bunch
Manny.
of this is too coincidental.
Manny, this is the second time I've read it, and I still didn't really pick up on how much preparation she actually did before that. That's actually pretty awesome.
And also, she
Like
gives
the-
her
I
the
didn't-
book on the Words of Radiance, like, you should practice light weaving.
You know what I mean? Like,
by the way-
she's setting this all up for her so she could disappear.
Because of the Words of Radiance. Because of the Words of Radiance, too, we get these awesome chapters or these awesome little segments at the beginning of each chapter that
yeah.
describe about each group of Radiance, which is pretty dope. Anyway, that was a sidebar. Go ahead, Manny.
That was really all I had to say. Like, she was just it was too prepared.
All right, so we have a group Brett bet going on right now that
Right.
she's alive.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
that's
think
alive.
she's alive.
All right,
Or,
And since we kind of got in. Sorry, go ahead. Or.
well, so one thing that the very first time I read this, I was, same thing. She's definitely alive. But what I was kind of thinking, and maybe even not necessarily alive, could it be that what if she passed over into Shadesmar?
Yeah.
And what if that's almost like is in itself almost a death? But could she be stuck there? Is there something that she's now in an alternate realm?
I was
type thing?
thinking something similar as well. I think that's a good idea because to me, there seems to be some overlap, obviously, with people that can go to Shadesmar. Like, because didn't Shallan
Right.
fall into it and Yasna pulled her
Yep.
out at some point? And then remember at some point when she was pretending to be someone else, Shallan even talks about how, oh, I almost said that like Yasna would have, or I kind of had took on this quality that I feel like Yasna would have had. So it seems like maybe she can influence her a little bit from wherever
See, that's an
she is
interesting
possibly.
concept. I like the idea, but I think that the influencing is Yasna influencing her, but just from a mentor.
Yeah, I think so, too,
Like,
but I was
I think that
thinking-
Shallan is growing. I like your thought,
Yeah.
though. I mean, I just think Shallan is growing.
Yeah, and I think one
as
thing
a
that'd be
person.
really interesting to
Yeah.
kind of consider is where are they in both places or are they only in one at a time? So, because a really interesting thing that totally was kind of blowing my mind a little bit was when Shallan first kind of washed up on the shore and she's trying to turn the wood into fire.
Yeah.
And
Right.
she's having the conversation with it and she's half in, half out. Like, how does something like that occur? Like, is she appearing kind of fuzzy in one world or is
Yeah.
she still completely there in that world?
The thing
Right.
is, we have no idea if they actually if the body just stays there and it's like a mental state.
That's
And they
what I'm
just
asking.
like
Like,
the-
which
Well,
one
That's
is
a good
it?
point because they call it the cognitive realm.
And one thing that would be interesting is to think about if it is something that you physically cross over to and your body's gone from this world, then that might explain why Yasna's body was gone. But if it's not something like that and it's just you're in both places at once, then that doesn't explain why Yasna's
That doesn't
body was gone.
explain
So there's
why-
some like
yeah.
questions like there,
Yeah.
like which one is it? Because
Right.
that may help answer some questions
I
later.
think like a really good example of what I think the cognitive realm is for those of you who read the Wheel of Time, is when they go to the wheel
Dream world.
The
dream world.
Yeah.
That they're still in the physical world, but they send the conscious over there. So they can be
Does that
have to
leave their
have-
body
Maybe in both.
vulnerable?
Yeah.
Yes.
If you go to the dream world with your body in the Wheel of
Oh,
Time,
you can go there physically.
you can go there
But
physically.
it's way more dangerous.
It's because you could die.
Yeah. But like the normal way,
Yeah.
they do it. They just like
with your mind. Yeah.
your mind.
So that could be
So
something
I
interesting.
feel that's what they were doing at the moment.
You know, that's a good point. The other thing I'd like to bring up, which may or may not be a little bit of Wheel of Time influence, is Pattern himself being attracted to truth and lies. Because the big thing about the Aes Sedai in the Wheel of Time was that they took an oath on an oath rod, which is a magic instrument that makes you not you have to follow
You
the
cannot
oath.
lie.
And they said one of their oaths is that we cannot lie. So they became pros at using the
Misdirection.
truth to misdirect lies. And Pattern's favorite lie is
That kind of
that
misdirection.
kind of
Oh, right,
truth,
right.
which is super interesting. And I was wondering if that was a little like
Influence or
nudge.
nod to
yeah, like a nod to
Robert Jordan.
Robert Jordan.
But
But
yeah, it is.
also, Ben, to think about the cognitive world, anybody that's played Persona 5.
Get the fuck out of here! They're not even sponsoring us yet.
It's also a great way to learn about the cognitive world.
Free
So if you haven't
advertising.
played it, do so.
All right.
But
So now that we have a
before we
little
move on, though-
subliminal messaging.
Before we move on, though, I would like to go back to the trunk. Now that we do know and have confirmation that it disappeared.
Yeah.
If anybody has theories
Well,
on what
I do.
that could possibly mean.
Well, I have a simple theory.
What is it?
But later in the story,
TM?
Ten, Trine, the woman, the leader of those thugs.
Tin, I
Tin.
think.
Tin.
Yeah.
No, Tin is the girl.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She was the leader of that little group. Like,
Yeah.
She had them.
Yeah.
Like, reveals like they're supposed to take that trunk for information for the Ghost Bloods, and I think they tried to, but when the Shaman
sank.
talked to ship, it kind of just
That's
got
a
That's
good
what
point.
that's what I thought happened was just that when they went and killed her, one of the guys grabbed the trunk and just went up to the top of the ship. So then when Shallan turned the whole ship to water, it just kind of got lost from them and it swept up by
And you
shore.
were supposed to
But or
grab
is
the
it something
trunk.
different?
Oh, they do mention something that the mission wasn't a complete success.
needed that- they
Yeah,
needed that
but
trunk,
that
yeah.
Shallan was dead, but the mission was. Although even
Yasna.
Tin
Yasna.
or Yasna, but even Tin was not sure Shallan was dead. She was
Yeah.
looking for confirmation.
Yeah.
Well, is she dead? She was like freaking out on her. Is she
Yes,
really
sir.
dead?
Well,
Yeah.
they didn't know
Or-
because
yeah.
the ship sank.
Just so
And
everybody
then
knows, Shallan
what do
is
you
not
mean,
dead yet.
Oh shit!
Well,
all right,
I mean,
all right,
we haven't
guys.
finished the series
All right,
yet.
we gotta move forward, but this is awesome. Like we got a lot of Yasna espionage shit. Oh, by the way, last thing, she was the spy master for Gavilar. Did you catch that in that first chapter?
No.
Of course, Yasna was the spy master for Gavilar.
Oh yeah, she was like
yeah.
running.
She was like literally going behind her dad's back and like hiring assassins to be on ready and watch, and like she was basically the
Yeah.
spy master.
Well, she was in the beginning, which is interesting. She was actually trying to commission an assassin to potentially kill Elokar's betrothed at the time, who is now the wife who's running the Alethi Kingdom,
Yeah.
while all the kings and all the people
Does
are on the
does
Shattered
anyone
Plains.
else
Scattered
suspect
love
that Yasna has the hitman on retainer? As in Ben?
She's just got a little pocket hitman.
Yasna has Ben on retainer. So Ben, I'd like you to come to each one of these podcasts.
Just be ready to kill someone
Just
if they shit talk
You
me.
know, wary. Just be ready.
Also, one last thing I'd like to talk about. I know we have a lot on the agenda,
Yeah.
and there's a lot in this book to talk about. But before we move on from the boat, why do you guys think that, like, instead of just like summoning? I mean, this is kind of a spoiler alert, so make sure that you're caught up all the way to part 3.
Guys,
But
by the
instead
way,
of-
just before Brett goes, we are talking this episode at maximum through part 2, most likely.
3. We finished part 3.
We're double heading, bro.
Right, but we might reference things from part
You're
3
right.
because
Good
we're
point.
read up to part
through
3.
part 3,
Yeah.
folks. That's chapter 59, I
Right.
think.
So, why do you think that she didn't use her shard blade? Like, why do you think her first instinct was to just sink the whole ship, possibly putting all these people's lives in danger?
I think that my answer to this is that Shallan is not efficient at using her shard blade. It's a great weapon, but she doesn't know how to sword fight.
Right.
And when you have a giant crew of bandits, you could kill a few people, but someone might actually be able to.
An arrow isn't gonna. Shardblade's not gonna
I
help
mean,
with
like,
an arrow.
and the other thing is, I think she's just hesitant at using it because of the fact that she might have iced a few people by accident.
Well,
I think that's the case as well. I think she is, she's scared of being able, like, using it. Like, a lot of times, like, she instinctly wants to take it out, but she has to tell herself, like, no,
Not to.
she's not comfortable
I
with
think
it.
what she's got is almost a mental block that she is this sword represents something in her past, and bringing that out is almost a confrontation of that, and she is 100%, I am not going to relive that. I'm never going to think about it. She even just goes, like, this is how she dealt with other things that we kind of find out, especially when we go back to some of the flashbacks about right after her mother died. She would just sit there and she didn't talk for months. She just stared at a wall, and it was like any little thing that would, like, come and reference something that was scary to her, it was just blank and just immediately, like, shut down. So the blade almost would force that confrontation, which she can't do.
Yeah,
I
I agree
agree.
with Josh. I was thinking the same
Agreed.
thing.
So you just feel like she's not far enough along in her development to really feel that confidence to use it.
Yeah, I think it's just total, like, even acknowledging that I have it is now acknowledging what's happened, and
Pretty
she
much.
won't do that.
Yeah, I feel like it has
She's
something
not
to
ready.
do with her mother's death.
And
for sure.
her dad, obviously,
Which is
and
something I think we're talking about later.
We will.
Correct.
We
Yeah.
have to. Yeah,
She
we'll get
definitely,
there.
she definitely doesn't want to
She blocks
remember it. Every single time anything about her mother comes up, she's like, no,
Yeah.
what can I talk about it? Yeah.
Let's take a quick respite from Shallan and
Okay.
move on to some other early parts of part 1 and 2. So we get to Kaladin, right? And this is Kaladin now adjusting to his new rank, which he's a captain, which is basically the highest you could ever be as a Dark Eyes.
well, I don't even know if a Dark-Eyed had ever been a captain before,
But
because
it's
down
the
is like the
highest
highest
you-
I would ever risk putting you in.
Right.
Not even the highest I've ever been. The highest I would risk putting you. And also, he's outside of the standard chain of command, which
Yes.
means that Light Eyes can't order him around, but he also can't order them around.
Right.
But he's in command of basically all the bridge crews, and then
Yep.
Dalinar's old guard.
2,000 some men.
Yeah,
I believe.
mean,
that-
he's basically got a battalion, in essence, like under his command. So he's got to get them trained up. A lot of that story is, hey, how are we going to get... Okay, he did a great job on Bridge 4, but how are we going to get the rest of the bridges?
Right.
So he comes up with a pretty ingenious strategy. Tef's training him. They take him to the chasms. They get him a little bit of which is a great idea, in my opinion, because it's like, this is how Bridge 4 did it. They were secret.
Now
they were known to
they're
be down in the
becoming
chasms.
part of that.
So they feel like they're becoming part of the same thing. Exactly. Great strategy.
Motivation,
So
iterative.
he's clearly
Brotherhood.
just a superb leader. But I think there's some other things he's really struggling with. And part of it has to do with his extraordinary amount of anger and hostility towards the Light Eyes.
He's a racist.
He's a racist.
No.
It's not a different race.
Isist.
I think
Oculist.
He's ISIS. So I think that the reality is that this is a great example of why being kind to people who hate your group of people of whatever sort is better tactic than anything else.
Yeah.
So, but Kaladin, I mean, he's a boss, but I mean, how do you guys feel he's adapting to this new role? I mean, clearly the king likes him
Well,
because of how paranoid he is.
I think I think that Kaladin was really starting to find a lot of self-respect, and he was really starting to find his place up until the moment that the bomb gets dropped that Amaram is back in the camp. And that's when shit hits the fan for poor Kaladin, because he just can't stand idly by and watch Dalinar shake hands with this slime
and
bucket.
speaking of that slime bucket, this is probably a good time to talk about the entire situation. Well, actually, I mean, we could hold off, but I mean, Kaladin actually tells Dalinar what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Syl wanted him to. Syl likes Dalinar. As an honor sprint, I think that would make sense. Dalinar's probably got
He
more
seems very
honor, yeah.
honorable.
Than anyone we've seen.
But I mean, you're right, dude. He was building this up, getting all down, and then Amaran comes to camp and he just flips a nut. And every time he looks at him, he wants to kill him.
And so he goes and he talks to Dalinar, and Dalinar says, like, do you have proof? Essentially, he doesn't outright say you're wrong or I don't believe you. He says, do you have proof? I cannot go with just your word against Amaranth.
So,
And-
but don't you think that's bullshit?
I
Like,
agree.
he's known
really
Amaran,
disappointing.
but like Kaladin saved his. What reason would Kaladin lie about this? Like that's just crazy.
Well,
A dark
I don't think it's
Yeah.
crazy at all.
I don't think it's
Yeah,
Like, he's
a rational
for
thinker.
years, and then this guy you just met, who was a slave, and I think it was
Who
maybe
just saved
common
your
knowledge
life.
that he was a slave or deserter from. He wasn't really.
It's
a
common
deserter.
knowledge that he's a slave.
Yeah, he had a
was
brand
slave.
on his
Yeah,
forehead.
no,
brand.
but he was like a deserter from Amaran's army. That's what the story says.
But
No, it's
that's
not true.
That's,
I'm not
I know.
saying
You got a
that's
good point.
true.
That's his backstory.
And then this guy says, that guy killed my crew. I have no proof. And not only that, I killed that charbel that he's wearing. Mm-hmm. Like,
I don't think
It
he said. Did he say
definitely-
he killed the Sharper? Or,
Yes, he
or
did.
that Amaran did not?
Actually, the one thing that he hasn't admitted to yet is that he was the one to kill the shark.
Yeah, I thought he just said that he did not.
And the
eat
more the
Sharper.
story progresses, the more happy I become that Kaladin left that on Amaran.
but
But we'll get to that later.
he didn't say
Oh
it.
yeah.
But then why did he
Why
kill
did he
his crew?
slaughter his men? Yeah. He said, I'm pretty sure he says, I killed it, and that he took the shard blade and slaughtered my men.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm-
check this,
I'm-
but I'm almost 90% positive that he didn't say anything about killing the shard bearer. He said, Amaran slaughtered my men and had me branded as a slave.
That's
I
what
think
I thought.
he said,
too.
just like Jeff said, I believe he says he did not kill the shard bearer, and then he took it from the person that killed the actual
did, that's
shard
what he
bearer
said.
and
I
killed
took-
all the witnesses.
He killed all the witnesses. He never claimed that he killed it yet.
So one thing that's
yeah, but-
really, like, kind
But
of
you're
what
right,
Ben was
you're
saying, though, is in Dalinar's eyes, it's just, he's now scared that he's at risk of whatever happened in the past coming back up and losing his job.
But is it
So I think
common
that's-
knowledge that he's an Amaran deserter?
I don't know that that's
It's in the
common knowledge.
records.
It is
But
in
even
the
if it's
records.
not
But
common
what-
knowledge, Amaran could be like, this guy was a deserter. He killed 10 of his own men so he could run off.
But
And then
Dalinar
now-
didn't have that at that point.
He didn't have it. He did a little bit later. We find out he looked into it. He interviewed 17 people,
Yeah, he interviewed.
from
You're right.
light eyes and dark
This is
eyes,
the very last chapter.
and he said they all said the same thing, that Amaran killed the
So
Sharper.
basically, he didn't.
Sharper.
He said, "All right." We didn't know it, but he took Kaladin's words and looked into it. Unfortunately, Amaran was very well prepared with
Yeah.
all kinds of witnesses.
Yeah.
But you're right. He
So-
looked into it.
He didn't brush it off.
Yeah.
He looked forward. And that's more than
Anyone
get
else would
most
do.
light
Yeah,
eyes would
that's a
do.
good point, Ben.
And he just didn't bring it up. Again, he didn't push the issue with him like, hey.
He didn't even punish him. Yeah, you're right.
So I think like he took it seriously enough that that's all
That's
I
a
can
good point.
expect if we
That's a
can't
good point.
find
I agree.
any proof on the other
Yeah,
witnesses.
that's a solid point, Ben.
He's probably
someone
one of the
wasn't
only
into that.
light eyes that would even look into it
Yeah.
and not like put the person in jail that
Yeah.
made the accusation.
Well, we'll get to that later too.
Yeah.
so
his head off.
Right.
So anyway,
lucky to put him in jail.
Kaladin is basically in the middle, right? He's really struggling because half of him is doing boss. He's accepting himself, getting into this zone, but every time he thinks about Amaran, he's like going to this dark place. And then Syl is always like, I don't like you when you think of Amaran. Every
Yeah.
time you look, don't let him ruin you.
I know.
Don't let him
and
ruin
that
you.
one time, after he was out in the field training his special abilities,
Yep.
he almost went back to Amaran's camp and
And
just
just-
assassinated him in the night.
that was
Who would
after.
know?
Yeah,
Who would
it-
know?
Yeah.
exactly.
And he was gonna do it, but still talking
Yeah.
out of it.
But the one thing that I would say about that is he should know by experience now that Syl could run him dry in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes to what we'll talk about Kaladin next and his angst at the sparring field.
Yes.
I don't know about you guys, but that was a frustrating scene for me because I really wanted Kaladin to just open up a can of whoop ass on some folks.
Yeah. He was obviously very undermatched. Even Kaladin hasn't faced four shard bearers.
Oh, no. Sparring match.
The sparring match.
We're not
Gotcha,
to the
gotcha,
duel
gotcha.
yet. Yeah, so this is when Renarin is just getting
Yeah.
his shard plate, and he meets their new master, who's a fucking badass.
Yeah. What's his name again? Anybody remember?
It was
Zit?
Zahai?
Zahil.
Zit? Zahale.
But this guy, Zahale.
Yeah.
Such a badass dude. He is a grunt. He kind of likes Kaladin, but he knows Kaladin. He just sees the chip on Kaladin's
Yeah.
shoulder. And Adolin was trained by this guy, which is
Right.
probably why he's such a badass sword fighter.
Renarin.
And then Renarin is training with him. And the training, by the way, the initial training is hilarious. He's like making him drink tea and jump off the building until he
Yeah.
can land on his feet.
Yeah, go land on your head.
I have to say that these three sections or these two sections kind of and it, everybody's got their faults, but it kind of made me realize a little bit that Kaladin has a bit of hypocrisy in him. He's a
lot
little
of
bit of a
hypocrisy,
hypocrite, and
Still has a bit in there.
like he's literally standing there judging Renarin for being like, he's basically has in his head like, he's a light eyes and he's privileged and this and that. But like Renarin was very open-minded. He accepted. He went in there. He was gung ho. He showed no ego. He wanted to become. No,
Renarin.
The younger brother.
the younger brother, and he basically went in there completely humble and ready to learn.
Yeah.
And Kaladin did not, even though Kaladin was the one that was
Yep.
judging him
Yep.
for being a light eyes, and Kaladin did not. And he
Yes.
actually had stuff to learn and refused to accept.
And this
the
is when you
teachings.
get to see Kaladin. He's going to have to grow, clearly. Because, first of all, he has a reason to be as jaded as he is. But he's going to have to grow to realize that they all will. Because this is part of the theme, right? You're going to have to realize that they need to judge people based on their individual traits and nothing else. And this is very difficult for him because of how many times Kaladin's been screwed over. And then because of it, I think it's hilarious. Adolin and Kaladin basically hate each other, and it's so funny.
Oh, and this gets into a really great part where they get into the fight.
Yeah.
And that has some very consequences on what his powers can do.
And I think honestly that I don't know this for a fact, but I think by the end of it, Adolin and Kaladin are going to realize that they're
the same.
they're a lot alike.
You think eventually they'll get a really strong bond later that we
I think maybe.
They're probably going to dump Shallan and get married.
Yeah.
But one thing that's really amazing in that whole scene is afterwards they get into a sparring match, Adolin and Kaladin, and while they're going at it, Adolin's pretty much in shard plate, so he's kind of way stronger, and he starts to really kind of beat up on Kaladin, particularly at one point throwing him nearly all the way across the dueling ground. But Kaladin gets up with near rage, gets ready to go back at Adolin, and immediately all of the breath or all of the stormlight just leaves his body, and he just kind of cripples, falls down. So he asks Elle, "What happened?" And she's like, "Who are you protecting?"
Right.
And that's a really amazing point. That's something that's gonna probably come up later. Is they have to be holding to something.
Right.
This power isn't just like you get it. It's they need it for a reason, or they have to use it in a certain way. There are conditions on this.
Jeff said something just a little bit ago that I didn't think of. I just thought it was the conditions of the oath or whatever that he lost the Stormlight. But if Syl took it from him, she's like, no, you're not doing the right thing.
Oh.
She said that.
No,
She said it left you. She said, "Who were you protecting?" Because he's like, "Why did it leave me?" And she's like, "Who are you protecting?" But that's a good point. Is it because she took it, or is it because it failed him because of a rule?
I didn't think of that.
I think Syl ran him dry. I think Syl was like, "You're an idiot."
I think that actually makes more sense
Really? Than the conditions of the oaths?
because there's no oaths yet. Really.
Yeah, that's true.
But I like that way.
I originally thought, I like this idea much better, but when I was reading it, I was just assuming that meant like if you let your emotions overtake you, then the Stormlight's going to go into the wrong directions. You know, it's like if he's just like putting it into this anger, and then he's not going to control it completely.
Yeah.
No, but it ran him dry.
Right.
Even his
But, like-
pain came back.
But like
He
when
was
you're mad, you know, you're just like, oh, and it like it's coming out.
the
you know
heavy
what I mean?
breath.
The heavy breath, and it's not being concentrated towards the right goal.
I think it was-
opposed to,
yeah.
But that's what I thought when I read it. But this, I think, is much better.
So we know Kellenen's got some growth, but we're seeing him accept who he is and get some training done. And there's a few big segments I think we need to talk about before we jump into part 3. Well, maybe we'll save some of it because we're getting close to our time zone here. But the one thing I want to bring up, besides this, feel free to jump in on anything, but I want to talk really quickly about. Actually, I'll save that for next.
Maybe it would be
I'll
a
save
good
that
point
for
to jump into Ishonai.
Yes, I agree.
Eshonai.
I want to talk
Let's-
about this new character.
Let's do some Eshonai. Exactly. So that's perfect because that bridges the interludes from part 2 to 3.
Right.
And
It's a
some of the
totally
interludes
new
I want to
character.
talk about in part 3, but we got to get some shit talked about on
Eshonai.
So Eshonai is one of the Parshmen that are actually.
Time out really quick. I just want to say something real fast. Manny, you don't have to be quiet. I was joking about editing your volume down every time that you talk.
I know he's
every other time.
sitting here like he's at Masterpiece.
So salty at me.
Masterpiece Theater 3000. He's just like, well, I think Shallan is fantastic.
Manny's researching. He wants to find out this Shard Blade.
He's still looking up the one question we have.
All right, we have a professional researcher here, and continue, Josh and Dross.
So I think specifically with Ishonai or Eshoni.
Eshonai.
How do they pronounce it in the audiobook? I've been doing
Eshonai.
physical reading.
Eshonai.
Eshonai.
So she's seems to be one of the original and final people who made the decision to kill the previous king.
Yeah.
So Gavilan, there are none of them left, and she even says,
Gavilan.
"I'm the last one left alive." So they all decide to, at that point, kill the king, and they go into this war. And we start to realize this is really taking a toll, and it's something that even the Alethi have had a little bit of a theory about, like they must be dwindling. And we kind of get back to them, and they're struggling. And they're losing a lot of men over this war that's been going on for 5 years. This war of attrition, nearly.
It's pretty I think, honestly, I don't know how you guys feel, but once I read from the perspective of Eshonai, I was like,
These are the good guys.
I didn't think that was the good guys. I thought that they made a giant mistake assassinating Gavilar without trying to first maybe explain what the hell's going on. And I think that there's a lot more to it, so they felt that they had to. But I feel that they're just people.
Yeah.
And it's really sad to me to read about that. Like, I loved it when Eshonai's like, I want to meet with the Blackthorn. We have to come up with like this.
Yeah. The winds
Treaty.
themselves are telling me to talk to him, she was saying.
Yes.
This
And
wind's friend-
And the thing that's awesome about it is I'm like, yes, this is what they both wanted. This could work.
Yeah.
And then Eshonai's sister.
The dirty, cunning bitch.
Wait, hold on. Is that her actual name?
Yeah. Just to follow back up.
Oh, yeah,
with,
right here, page
Josh and,
640,
Ben
dirty, cunning
and
bitch.
Jeff, what we were talking about. Kaladin does tell him that he's the one that killed him.
Yep.
And that
does.
Amran
All right, Ben.
betrayed
Cheers.
him and his men.
Oh, okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Good thing we didn't make a Brett bet on that one.
Getting back to cheers. Getting back to Eshonai, I agree, Demon. I totally really enjoyed the section where that first interlude chapter where you get Eshonai's perspective. I think thing to see in a lot of mainstream fantasy where you have writers like Sanderson and some other writers like George R. really getting into the perspective and the point of view of like the villain race, quote unquote. Like with a lot of other traditional fantasy, you don't really get this perspective of like orcs or people like that. And then for like Shakespeare fans, like the character Iago from Othello kind of summarizes like a very basic one-dimensional villain character where he was just out to get Othello just because that's what he wanted to do. He was evil, and that's why he did it.
I'm the bad
Whereas
guy,
with
that's what
these
we do.
characters, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
With,
Although that's
with-
pretty much Andrew's story anyway.
with the Parshendi, Sanderson really builds like such an elaborate culture, like of how the races all singing with each other, and how they have these different armor forms that they use that are integral to their society, where they have the they have the nimble form and the worker form and the war form and all that.
The mate form.
Yeah, it's incredible to see him really build up this race. And you're kind of, as a reader, you're kind of at the point where it's like, well, I kind of want this group to succeed, but I also kind of want this group to succeed, and I just want like all these groups to get what they want, which unfortunately can't always happen. So, well,
that's one thing that I think that's really good about this book is it seems like, even though we haven't been introduced to like the real evil yet, it seems like it's going to cover the full gamut where, like, yes, I do believe that there's real evil in the world. There are some people that are just bad, but I think the majority, 95% of conflict in the world and it seems in this book, seems to be caused by the fact of just perspective, point of view, and experience. And if like Dalinar had the exact same experiences as people that he's fighting, maybe he'd be like, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But then there seems to be something coming that is just pure evil, possibly.
Yeah, so I think that the one thing that we all get is that there is something coming.
Yeah.
And it may be... I love how Sanderson's touching on this, but it's like this higher thing. It's kind of like you have to get things unified and people together only because it's like this thing may prey upon the differences of people. Like the chaos and the war and the hate between people. So maybe it has less to do with us versus them, or this race versus that race, these eyes versus that eyes, or whatever. And it's more about like overall perspective and unity, because I don't know, there's a big theme here, because when you were just talking about writing in perspective, and we're talking about, we get to read from the Parshendi for once, and we start to realize they have a pretty cool society, which maybe Gavilar saw that, and wanted to, more than just his God strategy, he was clearly reaching out to these people. We don't know that whole story yet.
Right.
But even reading, we get a chance to read from Sadeas' perspective. You gotta think, like, when you're reading from his perspective, he really views putting his old friend down as like a mercy.
Right.
He really views that because he's part of this like high Alethi culture. Like they need
to be warriors.
They're
they have to be strong.
Yeah, he has it.
Button right there, Jeff. He says that a lot, but then he also says that if his friend didn't become like weak or insane, would he still do it? And he's like, I would.
Because he's a threat to him.
Yeah.
He's a threat. Sadeas is becoming power hungry. Yeah. And he likes it and loves it, and he's become that way.
Well,
and if Galavar was still alive, it'd be like, it's kind of like Batman and Robin, right? Gavilar's Batman, and let's say Sadeas views himself as Robin, but Batman dies.
Let's not talk about this.
But Batman dies. So Sadeas kind of is taking the place. I think he views himself as
and
taking
even
the place.
Sadeas, like, his whole thing is he lives for the conquest, and like war is his religion has taught them, and this is probably not, he's not the only one who feels this way, but that all life is a training ground for the next life. So if you spend all of your time like just trying to make yourself stronger, and if someone dies because they're weaker than you, then they should die, and you just keep getting more powerful.
Hey, question. This is back to Eshaniah. She was complaining hilariously about the fact that some people decide to stay in mate form all the time.
That's me.
And then she's like, and then she goes, I mean, I went into mate form and had a baby, and that was fine. And I don't get why you'd want to stay it all the time. It's like, so she viewed it as like being so, I don't know, probably because she's in war form.
Or because she's a female.
but it was
Hate mail can be sent to Josh
hate mail-
Armstrong at
hate mail at the cherry.
Feel free to add comments.
Yeah, feel free to add comments.
By the way, we do not approve this message.
Yeah,
It's coming from the only married man at the table. So.
to be divorced.
dude. But I wanted to comment on how she views the forms. Like, so they don't get to do what humans get to do, and she comments on that a little bit. Like, humans do, they have kind of in a way all of their forms at the same time.
Yeah.
They actually go into certain forms for a long period of time.
Right.
You know, which is
To be
interesting.
more efficient at certain tasks.
Yeah.
It makes their society stronger.
Yeah, it could
Does it,
definitely
though?
could. I don't know. That's interesting.
They
Yeah,
seem
that's
pretty-
a good point, Manny. That's a good point. They certainly view it as such because they can fulfill their roles with greater efficiency when they're in those forms.
Yeah.
And at one point, they mentioned that they used to have like 100 different forms or something like that, and over time, they've lost like pretty
Really?
much all but like 5 of those
Yeah.
forms.
It was
Well,
pretty much during
really
when they were
sad.
enslaved because
Yeah.
they started with two forms, dull form and mate form. That was
Yeah.
it, and they somehow dull form was able to figure out the they figured out
worker form.
no, it was slave form and mate form. Slave form figured out.
Well, they call
dull
it dull form. It's
Yeah.
not.
They're
No,
both-
I think
slave
they're
form.
different
They're not
because
Dull-
they send people in dull form to
spy.
be parchment to spy.
But,
and those are in slave
But
form.
by the end of this part 3, we already know that our Bridge 4 homeboy is in dull form, not slave. There's not a difference. They just dull form. It's easier to follow rules. That's it. And then people convert to dull form to be slaves. But
I'm
the
not 100% sure the two different forms or the same form. It's
Unclear.
Yeah, I don't know if it's ever defined because I thought it was.
I think that dull form.
Well, there was 5
is-
forms, wasn't there?
I'm pretty sure.
War,
Yeah.
mate, nimble.
and dull.
War, mate, nimble, dull,
Dull.
and art.
No, there's no art form.
Yeah, there was no art
thought they-
form.
No, that's nimble.
They were in
Nimble
more
was
they
the
compensate.
researcher?
Jeff's just like making
Oh,
up
they
shit.
discovered,
and
they
wine
discovered
form.
a storm form.
But that was the 6th one.
Yeah,
no,
that's
but
the
no,
sixth one.
but what
You're
was the
right.
form? The scientists.
that was the number form.
Manny,
That was
Yeah.
nimble. Oh, my bad.
Let us know in about 20 minutes.
Worker form.
Oh, worker
Worker firm.
Oh, yeah.
Firm.
Worker firm.
That was it.
They work at a worker firm.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I guess they're not considering dull and slave different forms. So we would assume that maybe they are. the
They
same.
aren't because they comment on
She
it.
says
they
dull
comment,
form is
Yeah,
the slaves.
yeah.
and
She's
the
like,
humans
oh, they
use.
went into dull form because they're preparing to be slaves.
that's what I
just
thought I
those
remembered
other-
as well.
Yeah, so dull form is slave form. I'm not can't say I'm 100, but I'm 99.9%.
That makes sense then. But they started with 2, and then
makes a
from
good
that
point, though.
they learned worker form. From worker they learned warrior, and then the most recent one's nimble.
But I would say that they relearned.
Right.
They
Correct.
figured out, but it
They
seems like
rediscovered.
They rediscovered because they're doing like science. They're
So
like someone's
basically,
researching.
breaking free of the gods seems to have put them back at the Stone Age, essentially.
Well,
in their version, right?
Technically, yeah, 4,000 years have gone by,
Yeah.
and they've been in dull form and mate form for 4,000 years.
Yep.
So any knowledge is gone.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Except
They're
the
not
few
able-
songs. There are some songs that have been passed down, but they've been misconstrued and pieces are missing, and they were like, it's hard to learn when you're in dull form, so it's
Yeah.
hard for them to pass
It's
those
it's
through.
it's
Exactly.
amazing when we talk about this because we had this argument about cycles.
technically
right?
dull form has no song. They
Yeah,
can't-
do they sing?
don't-
The slaves
sing.
don't sing, do they?
I don't think the slaves sing.
They like.
Oh,
they
they,
lost the
they do.
music.
They still
They
sing
do.
some because they come to the meeting. They come to the.
They have to be
council
able to
meeting.
communicate, and they communicate in song.
Yeah, they come to the meeting.
No, but they have mate form, and I'm assuming mate form has songs.
Well, the meeting has
Yeah, it
a
makes
dull
sense to
form
go like-
representative.
Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun.
So anyway, I think we gotta close out this particular episode, but we gotta admit that the Parshendi are significantly more complex. Their societies, they obviously broke free of their gods, and then that put them in. Interestingly, it was the heralds. Remember, the heralds would come back and try to bring mankind out of Stone Age to prepare for the next battle. Well, interestingly, the Parshendi seem to have flipped. The Parshendi were actually coming out of Stone Age, this straight up dull form. So whatever the heralds did at the end when they abandoned their swords and walked away, it did some interesting things. Mankind starts at a higher level. Parshendi had to grow from a higher level, but they seem to be finding their way back to by accident the gods that enslaved them
No.
in the beginning.
Do we know how much time is separated between the heralds abandoning their shards and the radiance?
4,000
Oh,
That-
no, it's 4,000 total. So we don't know how many years between the heralds and radiance.
Because
Did they say radiance was like 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was the
Wasn't
Radiance
bad.
stayed together for several thousand years After,
Okay.
but then they finally got. Probably they learned the truth, is what I think.
I assumed,
don't know what
I
happened.
assumed that the difference between them was just the fact that man or humans were there to see the radiance and they got the shard blades. That's kind of
But
like what
the thing is-
propelled them.
Well, the
ahead, isn't
Radiants
it?
are just men.
The radiance.
Right, but when they remember that
They-
flashback when they abandoned all their shards and they just start fighting over
Yeah.
them and
Yeah.
forming the houses and the powers and
But
stuff like that.
it seemed like they were coming back from a battle. Like the Radiants were fighting someone.
Yeah.
The people from the Desolation. So I thought that they, like, almost after the Herald's gone, it was only shortly after that that they betrayed humanity.
Well, they definitely betrayed humanity.
Well,
We
whatever.
don't know that.
But there's way
I'm
more
saying
known
they-
about
I
the
say
radiance than there are
I
about
say
the
that we
heralds.
know that because there's some dictate. Even the Spren, even Shallan Spren pattern is like terrified of the Radiance.
Yeah.
Oh, and the pattern even says, "You will kill me.
Oh, yeah.
You
Oh,
will
yeah,
kill me."
yeah.
You will
Like just
kill
like
me.
the radiance. That's what the humans do.
I
I
don't-
came here to learn about you until you
Doesn't
kill
like
me.
the
thing is, like-
Stormfather or something say that at some point too?
You
Yeah.
have
The
betrayed us.
Stormfather says that to Kaladin.
To Kaladin about
But I don't-
You are
will
human.
kill
You
her,
will
yeah.
kill Syl. You will
It
kill
was
her.
like but that betrayal that was humanity's talking about. I think it's just that they found something out. Jeff said like they
I think so.
that and that's like we can't do this anymore. Or they found out where the shard blade come from. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But I think there's
We'll
left
talk
over-
about
Yeah,
the
we learned a lot
Shardblade,
more about
so
that.
We're gonna have a conversation in the next chapter.
And, like, they didn't
True,
really
yeah,
betray
yeah.
humanity.
Conversation. Yeah.
They just like
Yeah.
left them like we're not gonna fight for you anymore, and that's what they view as a betrayal.
Yeah, I don't think that the Radiants necessarily betray them because seeing how they're depicted in all of these different situations where we have encountered them in the past,
Super
they
honorable.
seem very
So,
honorable.
we're gonna save this. They do seem very honorable, but there's some points that I know Brett's gonna. We'll start the conversation, I think, with this. But this is a great transition. Next episode, we are starting with discussion of Spren bonding, shard plate, and shard blades.
Oh man, I still want to talk
And-
about Eshonai.
Sure.
I still have some questions.
Oh,
Okay, Eshonai. We'll finish
real
up on
quick,
Eshonai.
let's do it.
Well, Eshonai used to be an explorer. In what form was she when she was doing that?
Worker form.
Worker's form?
Maybe Nimble.
I think it was.
Well, it wasn't Nimble because Nimble was the new form that they just discovered, or
Well,
her sister
they
discovered.
found out. I'm assuming 6 years they had it.
They probably
Maybe,
had
but
it
they
for-
said I think it was worker form is what she described.
And
Yeah.
oh crap! I totally lost my train of thought.
All right. So
He was
anyway,
exploring.
because
Good
good old Ian the
that,
Dream wanted to discuss Eshonai. I think we had some good conversations. Eshonai will come up next episode, but for now, we are going to close this episode out. But we are filming or recording next episode right after this. So to you, it may feel like a longer time, but to us, we're just going to continue this conversation. And for that, folks, this was Lit Literature, and again, it's your host JP the Demon. We got from
Cheers.
Sunshine, Arizona, our captain, Andros, who's actually a villain. You don't know that yet.
We do know that he's Cap.
He's actually
They don't know that yet.
Strawberry
Captain
we've
He
got-
loves jelly.
We've got the cherry, who's soon to be divorced. We've got the hitman, who's
He's our
clearly been hired by Yasna to watch over this conversation.
Yes. I don't trust him.
We have the director,
Yo, what's
Brett
up, everybody?
Lee Williams.
Brett Lee Williams. Check me out at brettwilliamsfilm.com and at bwilliamsfilm on Twitter.
And we have Mr. Mickey Mouse sweater in the dream, aka Yasna. All right, folks.
Yeah, baby.
We'll talk to you shortly. And for now, we will
Peace out.
peace out. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yes.